Good morning. Oh, now we're going to try that again. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Great day to be an air defender. Great day to be here in Washington, D.C. Guy, thanks for that great introduction and your remarks. My goodness, I almost felt like I was reading my speech here. But thanks again for all you do at AUSA to put these hot topics on for us. And we also do a series of evening roundtable dinners as well. And I just... You mentioned that I've been doing this for 3 years. Yes, I've been doing it for 3 years, and they seem to get better every year, so my opinion. But we've had some great speakers to include General Bob Brown that's with us today. First year I did this, we had General Brooks from Korea. I think we FaceTimed him in or Skyped him in from Korea. Last year we had my boss, General Hyten, who was here, which was great. And General Brown, we're so glad that you're here with us today, and I'll talk a little bit more about you, sir, when I get ready to introduce you. That's half my speech, so, just as you wrote it. I was wondering if you could sign it for me, too. So great to see all the other folks here today. My fellow lieutenant generals retired that are here, looking across the front table here and in the back. It's wonderful to see all of you here today, what great support you give to the enterprise, and of course what great mentorship that you've provided, in particular over the last couple of years that I've been in command. So we look forward to a great day today with the panels. As you look at General Pasquarette coming in this afternoon, he's going to tell you all about the money. That's a great ad. And then the panels themselves, I'm very encouraged and appreciate the fact we've got such great panel members. So I challenge everybody here to ask questions, press the panels. Very important topic, as always, with air and missile defense, but I think we've got a good lineup for you this year. Go ahead and go to the first chart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk for a few minutes here about air and missile defense, kind of the year in review. And so I always like to try to talk about these achievements or what we've done, accomplishments, using pictures with soldiers in it. So you're going to see a few of those this morning. But I'd like to kind of start in the upper left-hand corner. And of course, I've got the subject matter experts here that are in many of these pictures. I think I've got at least 2 AMDC commanders in the audience today. I've got Clem Coward, 32nd AMDC, and I thought I saw Dave Shank from the 10th AMDC, and then DCG for the 263rd, Brigadier General Frank Rice, and of course a former 94th AMDC CG, Brigadier General Sean Gainey. Hua? All right, there's a good Hua. Out of all of them, you were the only one that said Hua. Okay, all right. So, but if you kind of start in the upper left-hand corner, you see a picture there, and that's a relatively new picture, I believe, Clem, from Roving Sands. So a big accomplishment in the sense that last year I talked to you a little bit about the first Roving Sands that we've done since the last 13 years. We've had kind of a departure from that exercise. Decisions were made. Brigadier General Chris Spillman brought Roving Sands back. General Coward continued with it this year, and it's been a huge success, as you can imagine. Not quite as big yet as they used to be back in the day, but certainly a very major exercise in that I think you had an entire brigade out in the box there at White Sands Missile Range and McGregor Range at Fort Bliss. Kind of the days of old where we get the soldiers out on the ground doing what soldiers need to do, land navigation, GPS, use of GPS capabilities, and most importantly, they've done what? Incorporated space into it. So last year, as well as this year, we had a few folks, and I've got my 1st Space Brigade commander here today, Colonel Eric Little, who's one of the panel members, and as Guy was talking about, we're incorporating space into everything we do now, as much as we can. So we've been out busy with our space experts in the box with these air defenders, providing them an environment where they may not get everything they think they need, meaning they may not get the GPS signals that they think they need to have. And training soldiers to understand what that environment is like and how to operate in that environment is of absolute importance. And meanwhile, we do that not only for air and missile defenders, we also do that out at each of the CTCs every day. So we're embedded at JRTC, we're embedded at National Training Center, and we're in Europe as well. So providing that space characterization that they have to work on and fight through and understand every day. So that's a great event. So you kind of look there to the center of the chart there. That is a picture of the 678th ADA Brigade. That's the first air defense artillery brigade to return to Europe since the Cold War, right, Dave? HOA, there you go. You're looking at the brigade commander there is Colonel Rick Holy, and Command Sergeant Major Anthony Collins is the leadership there. And they've been there about a year, I think, right? Coming up on a year? So that is a huge success because, as Dave Shank will tell you, he's been working directly with the battalion for many years. That's how it was kind of constructed over there after the Cold War. Now having a brigade headquarters between the 10th AMDC and that battalion is very, very important. So we're glad to have the 678th over there in Europe working for Dave Shank. Then you see there on the right, that's the 38th ADA Brigade, HOA. Activated in Japan, they're at Sagami Army Depot. You see Colonel Pat Costello taking the flag or unfurling the flag, uncasing the colors, and his Command Sergeant Major Neil Sartain is the command team over there. Again, a much needed resource in the Pacific. I think General Brown would agree with that. We now have two brigades, if you will, in the Indo-PACOM AOR, which is incredibly important given the vast distances, the tyranny of distance that you have over there in terms of command and control. And so we got battalion commanders working for brigade commanders now. And because when I was the 94th AMDC, I had battalion commanders working directly for me. And there's a lot that goes into combat multiplying, et cetera, by having the right command structure in place. Also in 2018, the Army activated 5-4 ADA Battalion, newest air defense battalion in Ansbach, Germany. Do I get a HOA for that? HOA. Very good. The unit provides, of course, short-range air defense support to the theater, and it's subordinate to the 678th ADA Brigade that I just talked about in a minute. You see the picture there. That's Lieutenant Colonel Todd Daniels and his Command Sergeant Major George Palmer that are the command team there for 5-4 ADA. Also in 2018, the Army National Guard provided a SHORAD Battalion Minus on a rotational basis over into Europe to provide additional capabilities. There's about 80 soldiers. You can see them standing there. I think that's in a gymnasium from Charlie, 1st of the 174th ADA Brigade out of Marysville, Ohio on a rotational basis. That's Captain Chris Vasquez and First Sergeant Scott Rouse. So again, as you can see, our posture in Europe has grown, increased, with both capability as well as capacity. So very important. See the C-17 there? That looks like that's a very common picture for air and missile defense, but that happens to be rolling off there in Israel. Arrived on 1 March. That THAAD battery came out of the 32nd AMDC, 11th ADA Brigade, and is currently deployed over there, doing what we do very well, which is providing a deterrence signal as well as working with our Israeli partners over there. 2018, we also saw Iron Dome was selected as the interim cruise missile defense capability for IFPC. We're working the way ahead for the enduring cruise missile defense solution via experimentation and demonstration, and interestingly enough, partnering with the United States Marine Corps. The Iron Dome capability will achieve IOC no later than FY20 in accordance with the NDAA language. So we will continue to assess our options on for the long term for the IFPC solution. And of course, Iron Dome will be considered as part of that, but as we work through that, we'll be looking to see what we come up with for the enduring solution. So as you can see, that doesn't capture everything that happened this year in missile defense, but a good portion of it, and I think those are pretty significant. When you talk about the size of the force structure that has increased, you can very easily tell that that is a priority for the Secretary of the Army and the Chief. Slide, please. So let me talk a little bit about, speaking of the Army senior leaders, let me talk a little bit about Army transformation. So, in the broadest terms, we're here today to discuss our future in air and missile defense. We understand that our potential adversaries have made technology advances in nearly every capability in the past few decades. In this strategic environment of great competition that we read in the National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy, particularly China and Russia and other competitors are working every day to develop and field air and missile defense capabilities with greater mobility, range, speed, and precision. Across the Department of Defense capability development community, we understand that we can't continue to do the same thing in the same way at the same pace and expect to maintain and increase our technological advantage. Our advantage is a significant factor in deterrence, as I just mentioned on the previous slide. Multi-domain operations acknowledges that we are in competition with potential adversaries at all times. If the enemy can outpace our speed and innovation, it affects not only our warfighting, but also our deterrent strength. The Army has taken all this to heart and has made some very bold changes over the last year. In 2017, we began the process with new modernization priorities, as Guy was mentioning, that included air and missile defense. At the recent AUSA Institute of Land Warfare breakfast, the Undersecretary of the Army, the Honorable McCarthy, talked about how last year Army leaders held night courts, meetings to find nearly $30 billion of savings over the next 5 years to be reutilized elsewhere in the department. It was a Shark Tank atmosphere where you had to explain your program, and some programs didn't make the cut. A very thorough analysis was done by the Army senior leaders of literally almost every program in the United States Army. Also in 2018, the Army Futures Command stood up and took over the new cross-functional teams, which then had already begun to shorten some requirements and acquisition timelines to move critical efforts forward. The AMD CFT was able to accelerate the process for the approved directed requirement for MSHORAD from start to finish with the approval in less than 90 days. And the first of the 144 strikers are in production to equip the first 4 battalions in FY21, which was an acceleration of nearly 4 years. So based on this and funding support from Congress, the Secretary said last year that the Army had entered a renaissance, as you can see on the chart, at a time of rapid transformation as we undertake major changes in organization processes and capabilities to achieve the Army vision for 2028. Army air and missile defense is a crucial part of this Army transformation. It's one of the pillars on which the Army of 2028 will be built upon, will depend upon. The Army's maneuver forces of 2028 needs an AMD force with the right capabilities and capacity defending it. Chart, please. So the Army Air and Missile Defense of 2028. We're nearing completion of an updated vision for the enterprise. So I want to spend a few minutes on some themes you will see in it. This framework is nested with the National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy, the Missile Defense Review that came out in January, and the Army Vision and the Army Strategy. It continues to advance our ability to defend the force in multi-domain operations. Army Air and Missile Defense of 2028 defines the vision for the future Army AMD forces and outlines the ends, ways, and means required to achieve it. We have 4 lines of effort or ways essential to our success. We will ensure that, 1, we have the right capabilities to meet the multi-domain threat. 2, we will ensure that we have the necessary capacity. 3, we will ensure that we sustain our readiness with the best people and training, as well as adaptable formations. And 4, that we will ensure that we are interoperable and integrated to the greatest extent possible with each other, as well as our partners and allies. Slide, please. So, again, there's a lot on this slide, but that is by design. This slide shows a threat set on the left and capabilities on the right. Kinetics from the air and land platforms with ranges from very short to intercontinental, from small hobby UAVs that you can get for a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 on Amazon.com, to ballistic and cruise missiles, and potentially, and as we understand today, hypersonic weapons as well. Today we are also faced with non-kinetic threats like electronic warfare and cyber attacks. So the images on the left illustrate just a few of the threats that make the threat environment increasingly complex. So if you start at the left to right at the top, you see the KA-52. So for the air defenders in here, what kind of helicopter is that? What's it commonly referred to? See, this was visual aircraft recognition. Where am I? So that is the KA-52 Alligator, a Russian attack helicopter. To the right of that, what is that? All right, Chinese J-20 fighter. And then you can see the UAV that you've seen in the newspapers. That's a crashed North Korean UAV. To the right of that is the Iranian Fatah 110 missile. And if you can see that inset with the young men sitting at the computer terminals, if you were to look closely at their uniform, those are North Korean soldiers doing computer network operations. Then you can look in the bottom there on the right to the right of that. That is a Russian Krashuka electronic warfare system. And the thing we need to understand about that is they have a lot of those types of systems that can present a very challenging environment. And then you've got the Russian SS-26 Iskander SRBM. So the reason I talk about those is because I've touched on almost every country that we consider an adversary at this point, and they all have what? They all have capabilities that we need to be able to defend against. We need to build our capabilities to defend against those. So that's very important that we bear that in mind. So the AMD force of 2028 must be agile, rapidly tailorable, scalable, able to fight multiple complex and integrated attacks. So to achieve this, we have to optimize our formations. So in the future, we can expect to see a mix of capabilities integrated at all echelons. This is how we will achieve a layered defense in depth for the maneuver force in multi-domain operations. The lessons we learn in supporting the multi-domain task force pilot and exercises like General Brown had last year, RIMPAC 2018, are informing us on how to do this. We need interoperable systems and integrated forces and capabilities. For any threat, we must be able to match the best sensor with the best shooter, because there is no one silver bullet. So as I show you that chart on the left, those forces on the left, there is no single capability that we can build today, or maybe even in the future, that can defeat all those threats. So we must have a mix and a in-depth type of capability, that there's no one single capability that we will defeat all of those, but it'll be a combination thereof that must be what? Integrated and interoperable. Slide, please. So, investments. So this chart I've used in a couple other forums. This chart kind of shows you or illustrates to you what my thoughts are on our investment strategy right now, and how it's been in the past. So as we build towards this AMD vision, fiscal constraints, as we know, are a key consideration. Air missile defense, we had good news in the budgets for FY18 and FY19, but we have to make every single dollar count. We need more cost-effective options in the capability portfolio. When it comes to hitting a bullet with a bullet, we far outspend our adversaries on interceptors versus their threat missiles. The available technologies have changed, so we need to look at a wider range of solutions. We need capabilities to counter threats throughout the kill chain, in all phases of flight, and even left of launch. To achieve this, we will begin to include both kinetic and non-kinetic options. As we look at the new capabilities we need, I want to reinforce a couple of things, and you may have heard these things from both Secretary of the Army and my boss, General Hyten, but they are tied to modernization, and I think they bear repeating. As leaders, we need to continually encourage speed and innovation. We have to allow people to take risks. We've got to empower the best and the brightest program managers and let them run their programs. And if you recall, that's what General Hyten talked about last year. We have to have a culture, we have a culture right now of risk aversion, and as a big reason, those great power competitors have been able to close the gaps in many areas that Guy spoke about earlier. Secretary Esper has said we can't be afraid to fail early when it costs less in order to move forward. So those are good words there. That is one of the reasons we now have the Army Futures Command, because we need to streamline the process to break the cycle of a sluggish system that has become more and more complex over time. When it comes to innovation, there is a lot of untapped potential throughout our capability development community. We can do a few things to encourage initiative, innovation, and move past this culture of risk aversion. We can encourage a culture in which people are expected to think, judge, decide, and ultimately act. We can empower the innovators, the people with the initiative to put forward bold ideas. So what kinds of left-to-launch solutions will be available to the Air and Missile Defense Force of 2028? What's available to us on the right side of the cost curve? A culture of innovation will produce the new ideas that we need. Slide, please. So this chart illustrates how Army Air and Missile Defense will provide seamless coverage across the maneuver space for multi-domain operations, tiered, layered, integrated, interoperable. You will see multi-mission air and missile defense battalions in the future, for example, with both THAAD and Patriot, or Patriot and IFPC, or IFPC and Maneuver SHORAD. We will have tailored force packages, battalion, battery, or platoon-sized formations as the mission dictates. We'll also increase the interoperability of our systems to enable seamless sensor coverage. For example, we will continue to work, as I mentioned before, to get to where we have the best shooter and the best sensor available. Finally, on this slide, there's something that's not explicitly shown on the graphic, but we need it. Can anybody tell me what that might be? Soldiers? How about space? So we got one little tiny satellite in the upper left-hand corner, right? If I can see that from here. So as I'll talk about in a minute, or on the next chart. Go to the next chart, please. Space is critical to what we do. You know, when we shoot, move, and communicate, what do we always use? Space. We're dependent on space for that. The Army is the largest military user of space, and that always surprises people when I talk about it at these types of forums. I know for this crowd, you understand that clearly. But a typical brigade combat team, anywhere from 4,000 soldiers, maybe even bigger, has at least 2,500 pieces of equipment that are space dependent, and at least 250 satellite communication-enabled devices. That's almost staggering when you think about that. And our ability to be able to operate in a degraded environment and training it, as I mentioned earlier, is absolutely fundamental to what we do every day. We use space for missile warning, command and control communications, situational awareness, precision navigation and timing, and friendly force tracking. A more robust, persistent space-based sensor layer is one of the DoD's top priorities. It would enable us to track complex threats from cradle to grave, both prior to and after launch. So our air and missile defense soldiers must be trained to recognize when they are in a denied, degraded, and disrupted space operational environment. And as I've mentioned before, we have soldiers that are training that every day in our combat training centers. Our SMDC Future Warfighting Center, and my director is here. Where's Rick DeFata? Rick DeFata, are you awake back there? All right, all right. So Rick and his team, they've developed some space training kits to help simulate what I just described in terms of a denied and degraded environment during exercises, and we provide mobile training teams throughout the Army to add this challenge for units training at all the CTCs. The SMDC Future Warfare Center developed a capability called the ARDVARC that provides local GPS situational awareness, for example, and I think it's up there. I think it's second from the bottom, from the right. That screen right there, I think, is what that says. So always ask, how did we come up with the ARDVARC acronym? Yeah, if I were to tell you what that was, it would take up most of this piece of paper because it's a bunch of words all together, but a few engineers decided they wanted to call it ARDVARC, so there you go. But we've demonstrated that a couple of times, and it has good military utility, and we look forward to continuing to pursue that technology for the Army. Slide, please. So my final slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about international cooperation and interoperability. So start with a slide with soldiers on it. I'm going to finish with the slide with soldiers on it. So this is a very important part of what we do each and every day. The AMDCs do tremendous work all around the world in their separate AORs, working with our allies and partners. Couldn't be more fundamental to what we do. We all understand that we will always fight together. We will not fight alone, and our ability to interoperate with them, integrate it with them, is absolutely fundamental to what we do, because what does it do? It increases our capacity and our capability overall. And we have seen over the last year in particular the huge growth in foreign military sales of air and missile defense systems to our partners. And it's critical that we leverage that as we look to the future. And we do that every day through each of these events. And I won't go through each of those events, but it's pretty phenomenal what we do, the level at which we integrate. I will point out in the top middle picture there, that was Nimble Titan 18, and that is an exercise experiment that we do on 2-year evolutions at the JFCC AMD, one of the hats that I wear as the commander there. And we're just embarking on the 2020 Nimble Titan campaign. But what's very significant in that picture is that we had 23 nations involved with that, and 3 international organizations as part of that. And since that picture was taken, which was last September, we've had 3 more nations added to that. So we're up to 26 total nations, and that's from all around the world. So each of the CENTCOM, EUCOM, INDOPACOM, all those partners are brought together at the table at the same time. And that exercise has paid dividends in terms of increasing our understanding of not only capabilities that we have, but the capabilities we need to go after in the future. So a very important exercise campaign that goes on. We toughed it out. We had to go to Brussels to the new NATO headquarters, spend a couple of days there to do that final exercise, but we're already in the process for 2020. So very important. So as I wrap up here, hopefully that gave you a little flavor of what we're doing right now in air and missile defense, in the Army in particular. I would just tell you that we've had a robust test program this last year in the Missile Defense Agency as well. So that's the other half that we do. But overall, a very successful year. We look for a great year ahead of us. And I know the budget's rolling out here soon, and we'll start talking about that a little bit as well. But again, I appreciate everybody coming today for the hot topics. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, General Bob Brown. General Brown has been commanding the Army's largest Army Service Component Command, USRPAC, since May 4th, 2016. This command has over 106,000 active and reserve soldiers and Department of the Army civilians who support the nation's strategic objectives and commitment to the Indo-PACOM region. Previously, General Brown served as the commanding general of the U.S. Army Combined Arms Center at Fort Leavenworth, where he led the synchronization of education, leader development, training, support, and development, and the development and integration of the doctrine the U.S. Army uses to fight and win our nation's wars. During his, sir, you want me to say how many years? During his career, beginning with his commissioning in, I won't say that year either. General Brown has also served as Commanding General of 1st Corps and Joint Base Lewis McChord, Deputy Commanding General of the 25th Infantry Division, including a deployment to Operation Iraqi Freedom, Training and Exercises Director, J7, United States Indo-PACOM, Commander of the 1st Brigade Combat Team Stryker, 25th Infantry Division, to include a deployment to Operation Iraqi Freedom, and many leadership positions from platoon to Army Service Component Commander. General Brown, thank you very much, sir, for being here today with us. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, go Army.
All right.
Man, that was, sir, one more time. Go Army.
All
right.
Still a little weak.